Hi everybody, I hope you're enjoying your snow day, and I hope you enjoy this presentation on the Enlightenment and capitalism during the early modern era. So, the Enlightenment, we've been talking about the Renaissance and the scientific revolution and these new ways of thinking, and this not only applies to art and science, but also philosophy and this idea of natural rights. So, the Enlightenment is inspired by scientists, and they're thinking about how do natural rights affect human society and government in particular. Yesterday, we talked about how the dominant political structure in Europe during this time period were absolute monarchies, and the Enlightenment philosophers, most of them, are challenging this idea. The only one who doesn't is Thomas Hobbes, and he believes that humans are naturally evil, so they need to be controlled by absolute rulers, because giving people a democratic government where all of these evil people are in control of the government isn't going to be good for anybody. So he thinks, I guess, that just one evil person should be in control of everybody else. Locke, his ideas are in direct contrast to Hobbes. He sought to understand the impact of the laws of nature on human liberties and equality and questions Hobbes' theories. Locke thinks that people are naturally good and that they should have the opportunity to elect their officials. He also believes everybody has these natural rights of life, liberty, and property. And that the consent of the governed, right, I think you should know about this already from NSL last year, but the only reason the government has power is because the people that they're governing give them that power. Without the people's complicity in their government, government has no power. So he believes in that as well. And he says that if your government is not protecting your natural rights of life, liberty, and property, you have the right to overthrow them. And so the American Revolution in particular, and the writings of Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence, are directly related to Locke's philosophies. We also have Adam Smith, and he is thrown into this idea of the Enlightenment because he was an economist during this time period, and he analyzes the natural law of supply and demand in his book, The Wealth of Nations. Adam Smith, in many cases, is called the father of capitalism, and we're going to talk more specifically about him and about that in the next few slides. So, in the 18th century, France is the center of the Enlightenment, and the philosophers in France are called philosophes. And they debate these new ideas in salons. So here is a picture of a salon, and this is basically just rich people who have rooms that they don't use, decide to get a lot of intellectuals together and just discuss ideas of the time. Baron de Montesquieu is another important French philosopher, and he advocates a government with three branches sharing power. So he thinks that there should be an executive, a legislative, and a judicial branch, and those branches should have checks and balances. And so Montesquieu's ideas are directly related to the creation of the U.S. Constitution, in that there are three branches of government. Voltaire is a writer during this time period, and he writes lots of witty criticisms about the French monarchy and the Catholic Church. And so Voltaire is his pen name. He can't go by his real name because he fears retribution from the French government. Because remember, during this time period, there is an absolute monarchy in France, and so the absolute monarch controls the people directly. Then we have Rousseau. Rousseau writes a book called The Social Contract, where he says that man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. So basically, theoretically, you're born free. However, government and society kind of drags you down and doesn't let you live your life. His writings most directly influence the French Revolution, where the people we're going to talk about next semester, but the people of France rise up because the government is not protecting them, especially those towards the bottom of society. Most Enlightenment thinkers write for each other, and so they're just trying to, like, for example, at these salons, but also they're writing short books and pamphlets that are being distributed amongst each other. But there are lots of broader consequences. As we talked about when we discussed the Renaissance and Reformation, Johann Gutenberg has created the printing press, and so books and pamphlets are more easily accessible to people because they're being mass produced, so they're cheaper, more people are reading them, and these ideas are circulated all throughout Europe during this time period. And then the Atlantic revolutions that I had previously mentioned, but the American Revolution, French Revolution, Haitian Revolution, and then Mexican and South American revolutions all find their origins in these Enlightenment ideas spreading not only through Europe, but also throughout the whole Atlantic region. People rising up and trying to overthrow oppressive government regimes. Okay, so now we're moving on to the development of capitalism and technological advances. So capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership and the free market economics. So capitalists believe that free trade is going to help the economy, and that basically people work for and are profit driven, and individuals have a profit incentive, and so they want to work in order to make a profit, in order to just have more money. And so Adam Smith, again, who is known as the father of capitalism, writes the book The Wealth of Nations, where he discusses this idea of the invisible hand that basically guides the economy. And there will be ups and downs, but ultimately people will continually try to make money. They'll be spending the money that they make, and that is going to drive the economy, and it will always be regulated due to this invisible hand guiding it. Mercantilism is kind of the precursor to capitalism, in that we see mercantilist countries like Great Britain, like the Netherlands, exploiting their colonies in order to get more money, right? Because the colonies exist solely to benefit the mother country. And it's the responsibility of the government to promote the state's economy. So the government should be working to make the economy thrive. Okay, growth of banks and banking during this time period. We see more banks arising throughout Europe. People are able to deposit their money and to secure loans. And so it's going to be people who have enough money to put in the bank to store it somewhere, and also people, lots of entrepreneurs and people going on capitalist ventures who are going to be trying to get loans to work to obtain ships for trading and other things necessary for trade. Insurance companies are also formed, especially with all these ships going out into the ocean. They're going to need to be insured. And then joint stock companies are organizing commercial ventures. We discussed this earlier when we talked about the exploration to the New World and trade throughout the Indian Ocean as well as the Atlantic. The two main joint stock companies are the East India Companies, the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company. Now, as it says there, most are formed in Britain and the Netherlands because the laws are very supportive of these joint stock companies. In absolutist governments, they're more likely to directly control the ventures going out and colonizing and trading. The capitalist system largely replaces the guild system, so entrepreneurs are seeking ways to operate without guilds, which represented collective merchants or craftsmen, not individual efforts and not emphasizing profit making. Also, the putting out system is used during this time period, basically for textile production as well as the production of other goods. Capitalism and technological advances continued. The technological advances contributed to the transformation of Europe. They altered their inventions to suit their needs. So we see modified hulls of ships so they can easily and safely cross the Atlantic. The compass is improved, and then map making is revolutionized. So this here is an example of a map using Mercator projection, where you see the distortion in the look of Antarctica. Antarctica is not that large. However, in order to put a map of the entire world on a flat surface, when the world is round, it is round, it is round, the world is round, it is not flat. We see this distortion with the continents. European advances in metalwork allow for better cannons. They're using Chinese gunpowder. And this leads to the buildup of European military might, which is going to play a huge factor in our next unit in terms of European imperialism, especially in Africa and Asia. Demographic and social changes in Europe. We see a rapid population growth. We've talked about this several times. A lot of that has to do with the introduction of those new foods during the Columbian exchange and healthier diets from the Columbian exchange. Old diseases are less deadly. Over time, people have more immunities, but also because they're eating better foods, they have more nutritious diets that's helping them fight those diseases. So we see this increased lifespan. We do see a dip during the 30 Years' War. Remember, that was the religious war that took place in the Holy Roman Empire between the Catholics and the Protestants. And after that, population levels continue to rise. Commerce is increased. This leads to rapid urbanization, and urbanization is more and more people moving into the cities, which creates these urban areas. So during this time period, major urban cities are London, Paris, Madrid, Amsterdam, Berlin, Copenhagen, and Stockholm. And because of this population growth, it allows for rapid economic expansion and provides fuel for European settlement in the New World. So Europe is getting more crowded, and so we see more people going over to the New World. Social life is changing. We see wealthy people moving to urban areas. In the rural areas, we still see the putting out system. People are purchasing more goods, which is expanding the economy. We see people who have financial independence, and young people are now able to own homes, whereas in the past you had to wait for a very long time, maybe inherit your home, your parents' home when they die. Now young people are able to go out making a living for themselves and own their own homes. And marriages aren't necessarily just for economic interest. People start marrying for love. So overall, we see mutually reinforcing cultural, political, and economic components that change the power balance in the world. We've discussed this several times, that at the beginning of this unit and at the end of the last unit, well, pretty much for the whole of Unit 3, Europe is really lagging behind after the fall of the Roman Empire, right? They're stuck in using feudalism. It's the Dark Ages in Europe, but they start to pull themselves out of that. As again, we've discussed, because of the Black Plague, people start to question religion and they start to think for themselves, and we get the Renaissance, scientific revolution, Enlightenment, and then exploration across the Atlantic and the creation of colonies in the Americas. Older civilizations are in decline or holding their own, depending on the region. We're going to talk about, especially in the next unit, the decline of the Ottoman Empire, the decline of China, the decline of the Russian autocracy in particular. So that's all on the way. And then small European states are flexing their muscles. For example, Great Britain, who is a very small state in Europe, in the next unit we'll see has the largest sea empire in history because of all of their colonial holdings. And then changes encourage Europeans to venture across the seas to join the hemispheres. I hope you're enjoying your snow day. Have a great day.